Yep. Right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our full council meeting on Thursday, the 25th of July. I would first of all like to welcome to the meeting Andy Davis from Grant Thornton. Good evening, and thank you for coming. Our first item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item 9 as it's a relation.
Thank you. Councillor Dorian Smith. Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is the minutes from our previous meeting. To confirm as a correct record, the draft minutes of the meeting of the Council of the Isles of Scilly held on the 18th of June. Can I have a proposer for those minutes, please? Councillor Mumford, thank you. A seconder?
I just got something I'd like to...
Okay, thank you. Councillor Legg?
In the Otter item, I asked the Senior Manager for Strategic Development what would happen to the ash from the incinerator, and she responded that it would be transported to the mainland. If that could be added to the minutes, please.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
You'll second that now, thank you. All those in favour of accepting the minutes? Thank you, that's carried. Chairman's announcements, item 3 on the agenda. I would only like to mention at this point that I have decided that I will do a member update as chairman for each meeting. I was a little late for various reasons of getting it out to you, but as you will be aware, it came to you by email, but it's also a public document, so any member of the public will be entitled to see that, and normally it will appear under members' updates with your updates. Thank you. Item 4 on our agenda is questions under Standing Order 14, which I have none. Agenda item 5 is to consider reports from committees, including receipt of minutes for information, pages 7 to 28. Is there anything anyone wishes to say on those committee minutes, please? Okay, thank you. I would just like to point out one item that I've noticed in the scrutiny minutes, that in fact our interim chief executive was present at the meeting, but he's not included in the attendees, so perhaps that could be amended. Thank you, in due course. Thank you for those reports. Item 6 on the agenda is to consider motions in accordance with Standing Order 12. I have none. Item 7 on the agenda is urgent items, and I'd like to hand over to the Chief Executive for one urgent item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will be aware that one of your number, Councillor Marion Barclay, has been absent for some while due to ill health, and she unfortunately is not here today. By the time of your next meeting, 6 months will have elapsed and she will cease to become a councillor. However, in the case of good reason, and ill health is of course good reason, you have the power to extend that 6-month period so that the rule doesn't come into effect and she remains a councillor, and of course can then return when her health is restored. I would suggest you may wish to do that, and it requires a simple resolution proposed by a member to extend a period but by reason of ill health. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Do we have such a proposal, please? Councillor Davis, thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor Watt. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We move on to part 1 reports, agenda item number 8. I understand that that planning application has been withdrawn. Move on to agenda item 9, planning application. Hand over to Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a planning application to convert a 1-bedroom, 1-storey dwelling to a 2-storey, 2-bedroom dwelling at number 7 Garrison Lane. The property is an ex-council end terrace home situated opposite this building and adjacent to the retail shop Home Hardware. The proposal includes the conversion of the loft space, installation of a front-facing and rear-facing dormer window, a single-storey front extension, and a re-roofing of the property with natural slate. The proposal relates to a small home that brings it up to a 1-bedroom property that currently aligns with the national minimum standards in terms of internal space standards to a 2-bedroom property that also aligns with the minimum for a 2-bedroom, 2-storey property. The extension alterations are considered to be acceptable and in keeping with the character of the property without giving rise to harm. Subject to the conditions set out in the report, is recommended for approval. Let's go through the images.
What's happening now?
Councillor Grottick. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask the planning officer just to clarify what we actually have been given as information, just to make it absolutely clear that we do note that the neighbours state that the proposed application will interfere with their access to light, but that this is a private matter which must be addressed by the applicant and the neighbours, and in which councillors can have no statutory role, so to speak?
Well, officers have assessed the application as not having a significant harmful effect in terms of the light to the adjoining property. They have raised that as a concern. Officers don't feel it's a sufficient reason to refuse the application.
I just thought that would be good if it was publicly confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I haven't got any questions, so I'm happy to propose their recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. And just a question regarding whether there's any energy efficiency or insulation plans within this application, please.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Whether there's any details on energy efficiency or insulation.
There aren't, but the applicant has had the property assessed for solar installation, and it's been a property that's been discounted because it's not appropriate for solar panels.
Again, in terms of insulation standards in the extension?
They haven't provided any information in terms of, they will have to comply with the building regulations in terms of bringing it up to standard.
Thank you. We have a proposition for the approval of this application. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Marcus. Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda is another planning application for Baywatch Tresco. In your hands again, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a planning application for alterations to a new build holiday let that was approved at full council in July 2008. The applicant has set out a series of around 13 alterations to the approved scheme that cumulatively require amendments to the approved plans. The proposed alterations are set out on page 5 and 6 of the report, which is 65 and 66 of your agenda packs. And as you'll note from the report, these have been considered acceptable and in keeping with the character of the area. Overall, therefore, the proposal is considered to be acceptable and is recommended that condition 2 of P18042 is amended to include these amended details. All the other conditions remain unchanged. I'm just going to show you that's what's been approved, and these are the highlighted changes. So it's kind of a little extension on there, 2-storey. It's slightly wider, there's solar panels, a larger plant room on this side, and slight changes to doors and windows compared to what was approved.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus?
Are there any water retention designs in the house? Any?
I'm not aware of any water saving devices, no. I suspect they will probably want to put those in, but they're not. Oh yeah, it is a condition on their application.
In that case, I will propose the recommendation.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Mumford. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 11 on our agenda is the local validation checklist, also in your hands, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a report that sets out the requirements and expectations with regard to validating planning applications at the local level. Nationally, there is a validation checklist that any planning application submitted to any local planning authority in England and Wales. The local planning authority must validate a planning application submitted to the Council of the Isles of Scilly on the day it is received, if all of the national validation requirements have been submitted. The list of national requirements does not reflect the local circumstances and policy requirements, and in order to require locally important information to form part of a planning application, the Council must first consult on and adopt a list of local validation requirements. Adopting a local validation checklist enables officers to obtain all of the required information to inform the recommendation before the 8-week consideration period commences. This is critical in terms of speed of decision making, which is one of the performance metrics the government monitors for each local planning authority. A local validation checklist also sets clear expectations to applicants and developers as to what will be required locally in order to inform decision making. The draft validation attached to the report is considered to represent the list of information requirements necessary to inform local decision making, and there is an expectation that every local planning authority adopts its own unique local validation checklist. This should be updated every 2 years to ensure it remains reflective of local circumstances, particularly with respect to local planning policies. Members are asked to note the contents of the draft checklist and approve a 6-week consultation period ahead of adoption. And that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
This is great. As part of the consultation process, can we arrange just a workshop for members in the first couple of weeks of that consultation process, so we get a better idea of
that's a good
what's
idea.
Involved?
Yeah.
Also, with this checklist, do you think there'll be an impact on the actual applications process? Would it have made applications quicker in the last year, or what would the impact be?
It may initially hold applications up from being valid if they haven't got all the information that we put on the checklist that we say is required, but it will, in the long term, as people adjust to what we expect, it will speed up decision making because we'll have all the information required before we bring it to members for a decision or before we make a delegated decision.
And the planning department will help the implementation through that first tranche of applicants, because I imagine it's another checklist for them to do, so there'll be help from.
Yeah, I mean, part of the consultation will be to people who regularly submit planning applications to the council, targeting them and explaining to them the implications for development proposals.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have 2 recommendations. I propose to take them both together. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Marcus, seconder Councillor Smith. All those in favour, please. Thank you. It's unanimous. Item 12 on our agenda is the local plan submission and final consultation, page 121. Again, in your hands, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report sets out the latest update and progress to adopt a new local plan. Appended to the report is the proposed amended draft local plan in full at Appendix B. All of the evidence base is listed on the planning web pages, and they are also referenced in the draft plan. Appendix A sets out the schedule of consultation responses to the public consultation on the draft plan held earlier this year, as well as the officer's commentary and responses to the issues raised. The draft statement of common ground with Cornwall Council and Natural England remain in draft until finally agreed with both organisations. Whilst officers consider the agreement with Cornwall Council is broadly complete, officers continue to work with Natural England on the outstanding issues. But generally, as the draft agreement statement sets out, there remain a number of issues which the Council do not agree with Natural England on. Both of these statements are attached at Appendix C and D to the main report. Appendix E is the draft representation statement which seeks to set out who the Council have consulted with during the preparation of the local plan and the methods of communication, how issues raised have been addressed. This will be finalised ahead of submission to the Secretary of State. Appendix F and G are the self-assessment checklist templates that officers are seeking to complete ahead of submission. These enable officers to demonstrate how the plan and its preparation accord with the requirements for legal compliance and soundness tests. In working through the issues raised during the last public consultation, officers have identified a number of minor corrections to the plan in addition to changes that should be subject to further public consultation. In total, there are around 68 changes, and the main changes are identified in the schedule of proposed changes in the Appendix B as the main modifications to the plan. The draft plan has been discussed in detail with members through the local plan working group, and I hope that the amended draft before you reflects these discussions. Your agreement to public consultation of the local plan documents will trigger officers to commence a final public consultation before submitting to the Secretary of State. Officers would note that any further substantive changes that become apparent following this further consultation would be referred back to members before the plan is submitted to the Secretary of State. The process post-submission would then be in the hands of the planning inspector, who would appoint the planning inspectorate, who would appoint an inspector and make arrangements to do the examination in public before making a recommendation to the council as to whether or not the plan can be adopted as a sound and legally compliant local plan.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I'm happy to propose all three recommendations so we can get on with the next one. So if it is finalised, and I assume it probably will be, what's the sort of timeline on that? It'd be lovely to put it to bed.
It would hopefully be by the end of the financial year, so next spring, hopefully.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I'd like to second Councillor Sims's proposal, and just to say that I think, obviously it's been a very long running process, but I think it's been a very good process, and, hats off to those involved in it. But in particular, I think in the amendments, it's good to see that the housing targets have changed, and I think that shows that we've listened to critique and to understand the arguments, and I think it's been a very, the session we had recently with members was very good, and very pleased to see those changes coming through as well.
Thank you. So we have a proposer and seconder for all three recommendations. Would you please show? Thank you. It's all full agreement again. Item 13 on our agenda is the statement of accounts, an annual governance statement, the report of Russell, our 151 officer. Before you start, Russell, I should have just thanked Lisa for all your work. Thank you very much indeed on the local plan. Russell, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to say anything at the moment. I'm going to hand over to Mike Harris, who's going to take you through this report, as it's the technical statement of accounts which he's produced.
Thanks, Russell. So the report in front of you has two main elements: the Council's financial accounts for the 2018-19 financial year, and the Council's annual governance statement, which is required under the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015. If I just briefly go over the statement of accounts side and introduce the annual governance statement, I think Russell's then got some further comments on the annual governance statement he probably wants to make. So the statement of accounts for 2018-19 was submitted for audit by the prescribed date of 31st of May. That was some 2 months earlier than last year, which is good news. They're here for hopefully members' approval this evening. If they're approved this evening, then that's well within the statutory deadline for approving the accounts of the 31st of July. So again, that's good news and shows the further progress that the Isles of Scilly Council is making in its financial management arrangements. The main points from the accounts, really, section 2.7 of the report sets out that the council came in £55,000 under budget in terms of its revenue spending for the year, and the figures and the table in paragraph 2.7 set out that the council's general fund has increased from an opening balance of 802,000 at the beginning of the year to a closing balance of 1.97 million at the end of the financial year. So an increase of about 1.1 million on the opening balance. The table in section 2.8 sets out the 55,000 underspend by the council services and shows the revised budget, the outturn by each service and the variance against them. Coming back to that, as I say, an overall net underspend for the council for the year of £55,000. So the statement of accounts is at Appendix 1 to the report. Appendix 2 to the report is the annual governance statement. It's common for the annual governance statement to go to local authorities at the same time as the statement of accounts. And the annual governance statement sets out the control environment and the governance arrangements that are in place for the council, or have been in place for the council, for the 2018-19 financial year. The report sets out progress on significant governance issues which were identified in 2017-18, and further issues around governance which were flagged during the year, which may have come out of other reports such as internal audit reports, etc. So I think at that point, I'll hand back to Russell, who's probably got some more comments around the individual items in the annual governance statement.
Yeah, you'll see if you turn to the annual governance statement, which starts on page 87 of your pack. We have a statutory requirement to produce this document. We produce this document in the standard format set out by SIPFA to start with, which was a request by members some 18 months ago that we followed that standard. I mean, good governance is obviously at the backbone of having a good organisation. And in doing that, good practice is that you should review your governance, what the governance procedures you have in place on an annual basis, which is what the annual governance statement is. And that is informed by your key officers in the authority, by the internal auditor work, the external auditor's work, any other external agencies that are around, i.e. when you had the school Ofsted, etc. like that, and any relevant council committees. Now in the report set out here, on pages 90 to 93, it sets out the purpose and the principles. That's the sort of overarching standards that SIPFA set out in their standard format. So that report just sets that out. You'll have seen that before because we brought that in previous years, etc. Moving on pages 94 through to 99, you will then see how we set out the Council of the Isles of Scilly's arrangements against those principles, principle by principle, A through to G. Now, I'm not going to sit here and read those verbatim. I think you can do that yourself if you've not already done it, but it sets out the arrangements that are in place against those principles. So that's pages 94 to 99. Pages 100 to 101 is the council's view through those people that I mentioned earlier, i.e. senior officers, internal auditors, external auditors, and any other organisations, the effectiveness of those arrangements. And that's clearly set out in those pages where the feeling is that we have an effective control environment that's backed up by both internal and external auditors, the senior officers of the organisation, the Section 151 officer, myself, and the monitoring officer. And then going on from that, you'll see on pages 103 to 106 the actions and what has been done against the actions from previous years. And again, I'm not anticipating going through those line by line today, but that's how it's set out in the report. So it shows that we've had issues previously. That shows the actions that's been taken, the activity against those. We've got an annual governance statement here that says that we feel that the control environment is sound. We've got good governance in place, and that forms part of the annual report that we bring to you with the accounts to say that we've got a good governance process. The annual accounts are there for you to see. Unless you have any questions, I would then hand over to Andy Davis or Grant Thornton to take you through the audit finding reports, if you've got a question.
Yes, it's great, but there's a Cornwall Council logo on the stuff here, so that needs to come off before, but just on the back page, these three, and at the front page as well, and there's a page in the middle. So just need to be a bit, this stuff here is on the Cornwall Council. Yeah. So we just need to be careful about that. Also, just about member IT was pretty poor in that period as well. And it was out of scope of the inter-authority agreement. So I don't know whether that needs to be added into those governance issues for that year with a plan to go forward. Because that was something that came up a lot between members. So sorry to throw that in at late, but.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Just page 18 or page 26, whichever one you're going to look at, the balance sheet. I assume that I'm not really quite getting it. I assume there's liquidity and non-liquid assets in this. Could you just briefly just explain the difference between the long-term assets, current liabilities, etc. Page 18 or page 26.
Okay, if you look at page 18, so you want me to run through?
Yeah, just briefly. I think I've got an idea, but it's just to get it firm, really.
So the balance sheet is a snapshot of the council's position as at the 1st of March. So it shows your assets and your liabilities at any time. So running from the top to the bottom of the balance sheet on page 18. Top section shows long-term assets. The biggest figure in that top section is the first figure in the blue column, 37.912. So that's all your fixed assets, your buildings, your land, your property, plant and equipment. The next section, your current assets. So long-term assets are assets which the council will derive a benefit for in excess of 12 months. Current assets are assets that the council will have a benefit from for a period of less than 12 months. So things like your cash at bank, things like people that owe the council money that's due in 12 months. And similarly, current liabilities, so the third section there, the third horizontal blue line, the current liabilities are liabilities that the council has to repay short-term borrowing, to pay suppliers that have supplied services to the council that we haven't paid at that point of the balance sheet at the end of March. And then long-term liabilities are liabilities that the council has that exceed 12 months. So that third section there, the long-term liabilities, by far the biggest figure in there is the pension liability, which is just over 14 million. That pension liability, though, is offset. It's an accounting entry that we need to put in under accounting rules, but it's offset by an unusable reserve, which is shown in the bottom of the total reserve. So netting off your long-term current assets against your current liabilities, long-term liabilities gives you your net assets or net worth of the council, which is 22.919 million. That's represented by your reserves. So at the bottom of that page, it's split out between usable reserves, so your general fund balance and other usable reserves, and then unusable reserves, which are effectively accounting entries to offset anything we have a statutory override for. So net assets of 22.919 million is equal and opposite to your total reserves of 22.919 million. Is that okay? So
Yeah, that's fine. That
quick run
was
through.
more or less what I wanted to know. And also just another question, is there's been a sort of roughly 40% drop between March last year and March this year?
Okay, the biggest one by far, the first figure on that page, your property, plant and equipment, has reduced from 51.8 million to 37.9 million. The biggest figure within that change is the transfer of the school to the academy.
Okay, that makes complete sense. And I just racking my brains and it never occurred to me to think of the school. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have 5 recommendations. Sorry. Andy Davis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Russell. So you've got before you our audit findings report. Hopefully you've got our audit findings report in front of you. This summarises our work on the financial statements, but also covers our work on the value for money conclusion that we're required to give, and also covers our any use of additional powers and our statutory powers. It also sets out any issues that we need to report to you in terms of our independence, which there aren't any. And it also communicates the fees. If I could take you to the headlines section, and I'll just take you through the sort of the headline key messages. So on the first bit on the headlines, that sets out the work that we've still to complete. Subject to the completion of that work, we propose to issue an unqualified opinion on the financial statements. There's been 2 adjustments that have been made, two sort of significant adjustments that are worth just mentioning from the draft accounts to these accounts. The one is in relation to the McLeod judgment in terms of age discrimination, which has increased the pensions fund liability by £144,000. We're mentioning that because within the scope of our materiality is £250,000. So that, compared to materiality, was quite a big adjustment. The council were sort of really proactive in terms of and officers when that appeal was turned down. They requested an IAS 19 report, a revised. They took the appropriate action and have been able to get those figures and put those through. We've looked at those in terms of the assumptions made, and we haven't found any issues with that adjustment. There was the firefighters IAS 19 report was slightly later coming. That only equates to about £35,000, and that is reported in the audit findings as a unadjusted item on the grounds of materiality. The other change is in relation to a prior period adjustment, that the trading accounts used to be separated out. Now they're actually within the net cost of services within the CIAS, and that should have been disclosed as a prior period adjustment. That has all been put through now in the revised accounts that you've got before you in the pack today. If we can just turn over onto the other headlines, and this is covering sort of the value for money and statutory duties side of our work. So taking a step back and back to 2015-16, the audit identified significant issues that reduced the general fund balances down to £500,000. As part of that, we issued a adverse value for money conclusion and a number of statutory recommendations. Since that time, the council has made improvements, and now we're in a position where we're able to sort of say that actually those changes now are embedded, and that those Section 24 recommendations are now officially closed. In terms of the value for money, there's been progress, and I think Mike has been sort of talking about the the process, because if you think, you know, the 17-18 accounts weren't signed off until December 18. So to actually have the draft statements ready for audit by the statutory deadline of the 30th of May is actually a significant achievement. And that in itself backs up the sort of the embeddedness of the internal monitoring, the budgetary control, and the systems of internal control that are now in place. Obviously, the head of an internal audit opinion has also sort of confirmed that, you know, budgetary control is now where it needs to be. But, you know, the key message with this is that obviously we can't afford to be complacent, and that we need to sort of stay on top of this. The value for money conclusion has moved from an adverse to what we call an except for, and that is on the basis that at the time within the sort of 18-19 financial year, the arrangements in relation to risk reporting and non-financial reporting weren't quite where they need to be. We've had discussions with officers, and we know that's been addressed, and that will form part of the 1920 conclusion. So the next page just sets out our materiality, which I've already spoken about, the £250,000, and sets out triviality, which is £12,500, and that's where we set out any errors we report to yourselves as those charged with governance. Anything above that. The next page is set out our significant risks. These are as were reported in the audit plan that we presented in April, and the significant risks are going concern, which again, you know, we've done a detailed assessment of that, looking at the cash flow forecasts, looking at the level of reserves, that improvement in terms of the work that Russell's done, looking at earmarked reserves, transferring those to general fund. So we got no issues to report in terms of going concern, other than, you know, this ongoing planning, the medium-term financial plan, keep refreshing it and making sure that that isn't just a snapshot in a point in time, that should be a living document and should keep evolving as things change and the risk and the risk profile of the council changes. There's two risks around improper revenue recognition and management override of control. They're the two standard ones that we have to have for every audit. We've identified no issues to date in terms of revenue recognition or significant issues, and no issues in terms of management override of control. Valuation of property, plant and equipment and the pension fund net liability, which we've already talked about quite significantly. They're in here because of the size of the numbers involved, but also the amount of estimation that underpins those figures. The FRC has actually increased the amount of work they expect auditors to be doing in these areas, and that has led to some additional fees further down when we come on to the fee side of things. But to date, we've identified no significant issues in terms of either of those points. If I could then ask you just to turn to the Appendix C, which is the fees. Sorry. If it's page 30 on mine, but I'm conscious that's probably not your page 30, is it? So, Appendix D, page 22. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, page 22. Has everybody got that page 22? Oh, is that printed?
Just to say it's
So
page
it's either page 30 or page 22, depending on which one you've got. So this is just to set out the fee. The actual fee for the audit was £34,300, which was as per the contract, and then there was an additional accrual for the overruns in the 17-18 and to do with the change, the extra work that was required in terms of the change in the financial systems. If you remember back to previous years, things changed partway through the year from the Council of Silly system through onto the Cornwall Council system, which involved us doing the sort of the system side of our work effectively twice to make sure that we covered that off. And then below there, we've got the additional fees for this year in terms of the increased demand from the FRC in terms of the work we need to undertake, and also in terms of checking the additional stuff in terms of the McLeod judgment. It's worth mentioning, obviously, that those are all sort of, that's not just for the Isles of Scilly, that's for every council across the country that those additional fees are applying to. And then just one final point to mention is that the fee there of 34,300, the fee for next year actually reduces to £26,000, because that's to reflect the risk profile of the council, in that we're now to a point where actually we can start to normalise the audit.
Thank you.
I wasn't going to do any. If you've got any questions on any of the work we've undertaken.
Thank you. Russell, you have.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I'll just come in at the end before opening it up for any questions. I just want to sort of just run through quickly and give a brief summary of what we've just gone through to give you the context. I think we mentioned that the draft accounts were submitted by the statutory deadline. That's the first time the authority has done that for a number of years. I think we need to bear that in mind. Good news story. Today, we're going to hopefully approve the accounts again before the statutory deadline, which we haven't met for a few years. The opinion on the statutory accounts for the 18-19, at the moment, subject to the last little bits they're doing, is going to be an unqualified opinion. So it's a clean set of accounts. Again, another good piece of work. I think it's heard that Grant Thornton are going to lift the Section 24 notice. They're going to close that out now because everything has been done. And the VFM, the value for money position, has moved from having adverse, which is obviously a sort of red bottom of the thing. It's now moved to an acceptable position, except for risk and non-financial performance. And I just address that bit is that you'll see later on the agenda that we're already onto that, and you've got reports today to set the framework and to start the processes for that. So I'm confident that by this time next year, Grant Thornton should be turning around and saying those bits are embedded as well, and the except for will hopefully get lifted as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Russell, and thank you, Andy. Councillor Marcus.
I'd like to say thank you to Russell and the team for navigating us through this period. It's a lot less scary now than it was in my first council meeting when we were talking about finances.
Thank you. We have 5 recommendations in front of you. Could I please have a proposer for those recommendations? Councillor Mumford, and a seconder, please. Councillor Guy. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And I would just like to say from the chair what a huge relief this situation is. I'm well aware that back in 2017, when this new council was formed, there was a number of very concerned councillors from the previous council, but there was also a huge number of new councillors, including myself, that actually put themselves up for election in order to try and resolve this disastrous financial situation that we found ourselves in. And here we are now in 2019, seeing the accounts on time in an orderly fashion where we didn't know even where we were in 2017. And it's all thanks to the efforts through the inter-authority agreement, and specifically through the efforts of Russell and Mike and their team. And I think it's huge credit to them. But I should also say that it should be huge credit to this council, because all the staff, the senior managers, pulled together to get us out of this situation. And backed by the members, I think it's a time to celebrate. And there's huge cause for celebration here. And I'd like to thank you all for your efforts in getting us on to a decent track now. It doesn't mean we can be complacent. We've still got a number of issues ahead of us to make sure that we keep in order, but it's a huge step forward, and thank you very much. Councillor Grottig.
I'd just like to say I'd like to second that. It's been a pleasure working with first Andy Brown and then Russell and the team. And I'd just like to second everything that the Chairman has said, especially with regard to our officers and the team here. And hopefully we can move forward now.
Thank you. Item 14 on our agenda is the first quarter financial report. Again with you, Russell. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. What's set out here is the first quarter's financial performance report. It's in a similar format that you saw for the 4 quarters last year. I'll quickly run through it, pick any questions up.
If I could just mention, Russell, it's for those of you looking for it, it's in Supplement Pack 1 on page 119.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You got it all? Okay. Right, moving on, page 120 there. You'll see we start with the revenue budget monitoring. There's just a table there in section 2.1 that sets out that since the budgets that you approved at full council in March, there's a couple of what we call environments, i.e. transfers between the budgets to reflect a couple of changes. One of them is the transfer of the licensing management to strategic development, and the other one is pulling legal costs into one place, which are in a couple of places, and thirdly, reflecting the additional grant money that's been secured, which you've already had reports on and approved, but now we're just formally adding them into the budget there to get to the new totals for the services. Then moving on, you'll see that for the first quarter, we're actually forecasting a net overspend position at the moment of £80,000. It's primarily down to one service, which is the water and sewage service, which is it's based on the spend rate over the first quarter. So if no management action is taken and we continue spending at that rate, we will be £80,000 over. All other services at the moment are saying that they are confident in delivering within their budget figures. I think as we go through the year, we'll have some variations in those other services. Some of them will be up, some of them will be down. I think there'll be some underspends there that will help offset the position in water and sewage. There's also time, which I'm sure Craig will come on to in a minute, for management action to be taken to reduce the spend rate in the water and sewage. So the forecast is based on if we don't do anything about the issue. And there's also an issue that there's such significant work going on in the water and sewage service at the moment. We probably need to do a review over the first quarter to make sure that no expenditure is being coded to revenue, which should have been capital. There's a lot of work going on, which includes some quite significant maintenance issues, but there may be some new equipment being brought at the same time. So we just need to go back and make sure that nothing should have been capitalised. At the moment, I think it's a fair position to say that. It's not an unusual position to be showing. A lot of authorities have this issue that in the first quarter of the year, they tend to come up with the bad news, i.e. the issues where we've got pressures are sort of flagged up first. People that think they may have underspends in their services are less likely to suggest that this early in the year. So it's not an unusual position that you have this sort of overspend predicted in the early months and it slowly pull back during the year, in my experience. That doesn't mean to say that we haven't got an issue which we need to keep a very, very close eye on. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to bring the attention here so that we keep the focus on this service. And you're aware that it is a service that is under pressure and we will need to keep very detailed monitoring going forward on it. You want to make any comment before I move on?
Yeah, thanks, Russell, for that. So we have experienced, obviously, some budget pressures in the early part of the first financial year, and that was mainly in relation to improving the capacity of the desalination plant. So what we're doing at the moment is actually just working through some of that expenditure, because as the report so rightly says, I think some of that expenditure has been put into revenue when actually it probably should have been capitalised. And I think potentially that's where the overspend could be. But I say potentially because we're still working through some of the figures. What that will mean, though, of course, is that there will be a corresponding change in the capital programme. So what we will be doing is obviously fairly probably in the next meeting or possibly October meeting, we'll be bringing back a further report which potentially looks at the capital programme with some additional expenditure on capital projects, actually specifically on water and sewerage. As you know, at the moment, we're going through this kind of interim and transition period because obviously we're still looking to transfer our assets to South West Water by April 2020. But that still assumes that there will be changes to legislation which enables that transfer. So there's still some uncertainty, but hopefully everything will be in place. So we will be reporting back on water and sewerage.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Thank you, Russell and Craig. I was slightly alarmed you didn't say caveat once, which is the point really. I mean, obviously you have a level of confidence in these figures that you've not had in previous years. Good. Okay, that's all I wanted to. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. On your final page in section 16.1, you talk about the fact there hasn't been an announcement yet about fairer funding reviews and the like, and also allude to some changes in the political state nationally. When do you have any idea when we might be getting that? Or will it be before the 16th of September, 17th of September, or is it just a total guess at the moment?
I mean, yeah, you've jumped. I was going to come through the rest of the report, but I'll take that question. Yeah, we've been starting to expect it to have feedback on the fairer funding by now. The off the record type discussions are that, obviously the government have had other issues to deal with, and now we have a change in leadership in the government. I don't know when they anticipate announcing anything on fairer funding or the settlement. We would be expecting a 3-year settlement from this point onwards. That may not be the case. There may well have to be an interim solution put in by the government due to the changes, but we just don't know at the moment. We're just flagging up that normally we would have some reasonable intel on what government funding is available that we could start planning for next year. That is not available. That won't stop us starting the budget process in September, but we'll just have to be a bit more fluid and flexible than we would normally be.
Can we just let Russell finish his report? Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'll call you in a moment.
Four is something that you requested to put into the first line. We'll need to find some going forward. It's the latest management figures. See it in 41. Record shows that 28 vacancies across the snapshot at that time. So I think as we start reporting this, start finding Sorry, I didn't have the microphone on.
Could I just ask, do you know what that is as an approximate percentage?
Total is about 180, I think. So Okay, yeah, it's quite a significant proportion. Yeah. But we've got the analysis post by post, so we'll be going through that with the senior managers, teasing out what that actually means. Some of it is savings just in between people resigning, and then you get people back in. It just is a snapshot in time. It's also an element where we've got a full-time post in the budget on the establishment, but somebody might be only doing 4 days a week. So in theory, you've got a 1 day net vacancy. That adds up to quite a bit across the whole when you add up all those bits and pieces, because there's quite a lot of people that don't necessarily work full time, but the post is full time, and you need to really keep the full time on the establishment. As I say, I think it'd be something that we improve on as we go through. It was requested, it's there, it's a starting point, and we'll work on it. Capital expenditure. You'll see that the budget for the year is now just over £3 million. We've adjusted for the end of last year where there was slippage and budget carry forward, and then there was the addition of the voucher scheme money that we added in, which you approved as a separate report. What you will see in the first quarter is a very, very low spend. We've only spent 4% of the budget, 124,000. That's a very low start. I think we were working with the senior managers to reassess what we think the forecast is for the year, and whether the slippage brought forward means there's going to be slippage out the other end into future years. Again, it's not an unusual position in my experience. The capital programme, I think, as previously said, is always over-optimistic in terms of what can be delivered within a financial year. And again, this is about the third report we've done this, so I think we're now beginning to tease out the issues and get a better view on our capital position. Section 6 is a bit that was again requested to be added into the report from previous years, that some of the larger schemes, particularly both revenue and capital, we ought to have a slightly better analysis of. So again, starting point, we'll work on improving this to go through, but we've picked out that a couple of schemes where the total spend will be over £1 million, and done a brief report on the position where we are. You've got the Go EV electric vehicle car share project, where we've got two tables to start with. One was that what was approved in the December 2018 full council report, and now we've updated that with the actual for last year. You'll see there was slippage last year. We only spent 234,000 against the 372k. That money has drifted forward into 2019-20. So financially, we're not predicting that we're going to overspend at the moment or anything on this scheme. So we're still within the funding. The activity there is set out. I believe members are circulated with a report on the activity on a regular basis, but picking out some of the key elements of work during the quarter, the type and the location of charging points being looked at. There's been a demonstration of some electrical vehicles. Initial work has started on formulating how the car scheme may work. Some of the grant claims have been submitted, and we're talking with ERDF about reprofiling the financial spend. The second one, the voucher scheme, just started its early inception. That the project initiation visit was on the 23rd of April. We've put in 2 claims to date, and we're looking at the moment there's going to be that we're behind target because we started later than anticipated, and we're reviewing what that actually means to the programme in total. On there are some 23 expressions of interest being developed, and approval of the first 6 so are ready for appraisal by September. So clearly we're starting to develop this. What I will say is, I think in time we will need to think on these major schemes whether they stay as part of the financial report or go into the non-financial performance report. But for now, the request was that those are big schemes, and we need to just identify them in the finance report so they're there, so that we've got an eye on big schemes. Moving on, section 7, travel expenses by services. This was an issue where we tried to identify expenses last year, identified that there was very little going through directors, what we call expenses through payroll. So we've decided to do a travel expenses analysis by service which is attached in Appendix B for you. I'm not going to go down line by line on that, but that was, again, members requested they wanted to see that specific expenditure. Section 8 is our savings forecast, which is where we compare the risk against our forecast savings. We've got 483,000 built into the budget and the MTFP for 2019-20. When we did the budget, we assessed that they were all low risk and we were going to deliver 100%. We've done a review for the first quarter. Nearly all of them are still low risk and we feel they're deliverable, but one has just drifted into amber. So in essence, with likelihood, we will be about 5,000 light on delivering the savings, but at the moment that's being impacted by the senior manager in that area with other savings. So there's no impact on the bottom line. The reason for it being deemed to be amber is, although that we had a plan in place, we'd gone through all the processes, and so it was low risk. Even if you have a plan, sometimes the plan doesn't actually deliver, and the plan didn't deliver an appointment here, which was to try and reduce our sort of locum costs. We're putting arrangements in to try and reduce the cost to mitigate that, but it's fair to say that it's amber rather than green at the moment, but all the other savings are deemed to be low risk. And in fact, if you look at the risk score compared with what we did when we set the budget, although they're still green, the actual risk is even reduced further, as some of those plans are now actually being delivered. In terms of performance on council tax, we got a very good performance in the first quarter. Target for the first quarter was 30%. We actually delivered 35.26%, so we're well up 5% ahead of the target. And hopefully, there's less noise in the system this year on council tax as well. So I think it's beginning to bed down and going quite well. What I will raise your members to is that at the bottom of page 127, we have had to write off £253 worth of council tax that was on the system, which is uncollectible. This is council tax that relates to the 16-17 period, and as we've already mentioned about the financial affairs in 16-17, for some reason, the debtors have given us proof that they paid it, but it wasn't offset against their accounts. So we're writing that £253 off. In terms of the top of page 128, business rates, again, collection is going well here, 37.42 against the target of 33%, so we're ahead. Business rates was a bit of a slow start last year. This year, I think, not so. We've got a better performance and it's looking good. No debts have had to be written off here. Water rate collection performance is going well. We've collected 275,000 to date of the 676 that needs to be collected. That will increase slightly with the charges for the metered stuff during the year, but we've already got 40% of the fixed charges in for the year. That's good. But here we have had to write off £6,400 worth of outstanding water rate invoices. One relates to a vulnerable person, which was a build-up over 10 years. We're unable to take any enforcement action because of them being a vulnerable person. So we're writing that off. It's probably likely it should have been written off previously. And the other one is to do with an organisation that went into bankruptcy that had two separate accounts for this. Again, both items are quite old, and as I said previously, we're teasing these out. We'll get to the bottom of those, and I don't apologise that there will probably be some more write-offs during the year. The only thing I can say is that we have a provision for bad debts. Most of these debts we're writing off were 100% provided for anyway, so there's going to be no overall impact on the council's financial position. Housing rent collection. On here, we've changed the reporting tool that we've been using, and the figures are starting to look a little bit unusual, so don't want to spend too much time on looking on those at the moment, and we're ongoing and we're looking at it. But I had an update just before the meeting, and we think that our collection amount collected is pretty much in line with the amount due. So we don't think that the outstanding position has got any worse. In here, we had a bit of a funny position where it looked like it got considerably better. In fact, we're in credit, and it's say due to the reporting tool change of a method, and it's picking up an incorrect figure. Again, no debts written off here. Sundry debt position, a vast improvement during the period, which is looking good. A little bit of a strange position between overdue and within terms due to some unallocated money. Overall, the current balance is down to 180,000, which I think is good. And again, no debts written off. 14 is a new section. We have to report on an annual basis as a statutory requirement to report payment performance of purchase invoices. So we've now built this in so that it's monitored on a regular basis to you, so that when we produce the statutory annual report, you won't be surprised. Yeah, I think you can see that generally payment performance is good. We measure it against 3 specific indicators, which is trying to pay all suppliers within 30 days, which at the moment, as at June's performance was 96%, the target is 92. Payment to local SMEs within 30 days, the target at 95%, we're at 98 at the end of June. And payment to SME suppliers in 14 days, because we try and pay local suppliers faster than national suppliers. We set a target trying to pay 75% of our invoices, and we're at 79.4. The only issue we've had in this first quarter is the payment to local SMEs within 14 days for April was a fraction under the target, but overall we're doing very well in paying invoices on time. This is payment of invoices which are not in dispute, because obviously you can take those out of the equation. In terms of Treasury management, there was no activity in the quarter, and there's no need to amend any of the prudential indicators. And the point raised earlier, the future budget setting process, just to let you know, we haven't had the figures for any real information out of central government at the moment, but 17th of September, we're going to start the budget process with a seminar before full council, and from that we'll set out the detailed timetable and the activity from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Russell and team, for excellent report. And I think the quality of information is just getting better, really. I just had a few questions. I'll just sort of lump them all, and maybe you can come back to us. Thank you for the new section on vacancy management as requested. I think I've been banging on about it for a while. I guess, yeah, as you said, the questions are, what are the impacts then on our services and finances? So that'd be good to see in the future. On section 8, the forecast savings, I have to say that seems extremely good going to achieve those levels of savings. So very impressive, really. And then on the section 14, again, that's good data to see, and I'm very pleased to see that local suppliers are getting preferential treatment in terms of speed of payment, and it's good data and a good policy, so I'm really pleased to see that. And just lastly, to pick up on, as Councillor Williams said, around the future budget setting and the review settlement from government, to me this seems as an organisation of pretty big risk. Presumably the LGA are quite live to this issue. What's their stand on this at the moment?
Not specifically LGA, but there was a conference at the beginning of July, the local government conference. There's also a lot of stuff in the press. There is a lot of pressure being put in through every local government organisation that we're in the dark. There's organisations that are in quite poor financial position and not getting decent information from the government over future settlements. That's sort of starting to say that you're putting us in very, very in a very poor position, and they don't. There is a lot of pressure going on nationally, but as I say, you've only got a cabinet appointed as of yesterday, and we don't know what their policies are going to be on local government, etc. going forward. There was an announcement yesterday of the new Chief Secretary to the Treasury, who is expected to concentrate significantly on the spending review during the autumn. That is it. That is the statement we've got at the moment.
Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Appendix B, that's just for this quarter, yes? So that is 47, nearly 50 grand on travel and expenses in 3 months. Yeah? Okay, just get my head around that. And the capital expenditure table, I think that's quite concerning, given that last year from the statement of accounts, we only spent 1.2 million on capital projects throughout the whole year. That's all we achieved. We've got 3 million budgeted this year. It seems to be total fantasy that we're going to actually achieve any of that. So it'll be good to, and again, I've been banging on about this for the last couple of months. These big projects we've got coming up as well, it's only going to impact on the smaller capital projects, given that we are carrying so many vacancies as well. I think we need to have a bit more of a realistic idea and expectations about what we can actually achieve, given the resources that we've got ourselves.
I wouldn't disagree. I mean, it's an issue I see in a number of organisations I've been in on a similar basis. What I will say here is there are a number of schemes in here which we know are going to have fairly significant spend once they get up and running in the year. And it will be quite lumpy expenditure, so it will accelerate. For instance, on the school condition grant, I think we've just approved a significant allocation of money to the school to address some works on the mugger.
Brilliant, yeah, and I understand that's happening this summer as well, so good, yeah, but those schemes have been from last year as well, and the year before, so it's, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Russell. I take it that members are happy that we note the two recommendations, A and B. Yes? Yeah, great. Thank you. So we move on to item 15 on the agenda, which is the review of member allowances scheme, page 673. I'll hand over to our lead member. Sorry.
Have we voted that through? Agenda.
Sorry?
Have we voted through agenda 14?
No, we don't. We're just noting it. Yeah, thank you. As long as you agreed to note it, that's fine. Thank you. So item 15 on the agenda, I'm going to hand over to our lead member for finance. Thank you, Fran.
Thank you, Chair. So we're back, as the Chair has said, on page 673 of the main agenda pack, and we're looking at the review of member allowances scheme. The report has two recommendations, which I'm going to propose. The report introduces a new scheme and a new role profile for members. You will have noted that the scheme at Appendix A to the report contains the amount of allowances at Schedules 1 and 2. They are, as you will have noted, the current allowance figures. The revised figures recommended by the working group are set out in the table at paragraph 10 on page 5 of the report. This is page 677 of the agenda. So shall I pause for a minute? The purpose of this is to allow members to consider the figures and insert them, or indeed any other figures, into Schedule 1 and 2 of the scheme as you choose. I think that the figures in paragraph 10 of the report as recommended are indeed the right figures, and I propose that they're adopted and form Schedules 1 and 2 of the new scheme. For ease of reference, I have put in front of you a copy of the scheme I propose with the figures I propose. Andy Thomas has prepared this, which was handed round earlier. So to continue with a bit of historical background, the paper delivers on an understanding that we would review the member allowances in this council year. I'll take the paper as read, but hope you will not mind a little supplementary background information that might hopefully be useful, especially for those colleagues who were not members in the autumn of 2016. In the autumn of 2016, the Council was in receipt of, we discussed earlier in the meeting, of a Section 24 notice, voicing auditor concerns at the Council's financial management. Allied to this Section 24, savings were needed, and it was suggested that members agreed to save 25,000 from the allowances budget. We agreed to save this. At this time also, the Boundary Commission were invited to review our councillor numbers, and indeed our numbers were cut from 21 to the present 16 members from May 2017. With this cut in numbers, as we all agreed, the committee structure was not tenable, and so the lead member role was extended. However, for the year 2017 to 2018, these lead members, excepting for the lead member for children, which as we know is a statutory role, members did not receive a responsibility allowance in respect of these lead member roles. From May 2018, further cuts were agreed in order that the lead member role be modestly remunerated and that budget savings could be maintained. These cuts were backdated to the beginning of the financial year. At the same time, a review was agreed for the year end, and this is the result of that review. So it is now time to look to the future. And it is worth noting that historically, the member allowance budget has been considerably larger. Councillor numbers were greater, and committee chairs received a greater responsibility allowance than is currently proposed for lead members. In addition, as mentioned in the report, it is now expected that all members take time to study all areas of the council's work. More regular full councils each month in general increase the general workload, although the committee workload can be less. Although obviously not for some members who serve on scrutiny, for example. This is the rationale behind the increase in the basic member allowance. As the council works to progress substantial areas of work, it is right, I think, that members receive a reasonable remuneration in recognition of the professional role that we expect of them, which they undertake to the best of their ability. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now open the discussion, please, Chair.
Councillor Watt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Could I just point out a question about the point of principle on this? A year ago, it was decided, as the Vice Chairman rightly said, that we agreed to a reduction, which was backdated to, as far as I remember, May the 8th. And in practice, I can tell you that for me in particular, I had to pay back £630, 46p. So, okay, I accepted that, but now it comes to a point where we are approving a different scheme, but that is not backdated. Now, why is there a contradiction between backdating reductions, but not backdating a new scheme? So I'd just like to make that point. And also, I would add that recommendation 1, I would just like to add to it following Appendix A, and that the revised scheme is backdated from the date of full council on May the 14th, 2019.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
May I have five on that, Chairman?
You may.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I cannot answer the question as to why the decision was made last year that was made. I was not here on that. So far as the backdating of the proposal is concerned, the scheme itself does not allow that. And what the scheme provides in section 6 is the calculation for part year entitlements and how that should be calculated. When the Democratic Processes Panel was asked to review the scheme before it came to council. That was done, and the whole scheme was reviewed, and the allowances were reviewed, and the recommendations of the panel are before you now. The Democratic Processes Panel has not recommended that Part 6 of the scheme be reviewed, and so that is not before you at present.
Councillor Sims.
We got on page, it's hard to work out what page it is, 676. The first two ability points basically talking about financial motivation for being on the council. I tend to agree. I don't think there is a financial motivation to be on the council, but I do definitely strongly believe that there is a financial disincentive for being on the council. Like, some people won't do it because it's just not viable for them. So I don't think people do it for the money, but I think people will not do it because they're not adequately compensated. And I think that perhaps should be reflected, because I think that's perhaps more important than the actual compensation. And also another thing is we have quite a lot of councillors now who are under 60. I'm not one of them anymore, so it's sort of almost turning into a kids' party now. But on that basis, if we want younger people to come on the council, this is a definite step in the right direction. And also, you know, what we get paid, 58% less than Cornwall, 37% less than most authorities in the country. Well, I think quite a lot of us do a lot more work than members elsewhere, not because they're idle, but because there's not that many of us.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was in a similar situation to Councillor Watt. I totally concur with what he said, and I would second his proposal that we backdate till May.
Yeah, just for the actual policy, I'd like to praise the local context paragraph on page 695. That's really good. Good mention of circular economy and how everything is intertwined here. If we are, I'd just like to propose an amendment to the amendment, and we have a separate amendment for one recommendation is accepting the member allowance scheme. A second recommendation would be backdating that allowance scheme. So we could take a separate vote on both those points. Does that make sense? No? Clear as mud. Yeah.
I'll come to that in a moment, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong. But is there any further discussion on this first? Councillor Grotte.
Can I ask the monitoring officer's advice in a way through this, what might be seen as a slight impasse? It seems to me that these are recommendations from a working party of the Democratic Processes Panel. However, technically, each and every councillor can sit on the Democratic Processes Panel. So surely, should the corporate body of council decide that they would prefer to take an additional recommendation, such as backdating the allowance, I would argue that our full council should be able to amend a recommendation from a Democratic Processes Panel's working party. Perhaps the monitoring officer would like to comment, and possibly the interim chief executive as well, please.
Thank you.
I would love to comment. Through you, Chairman. What I suggest as a way forward is that you accept the recommendation of the Democratic Processes Panel, which would give an increase in the allowance. And then what I suggest that you then do, because the amendment which is proposed is not allowed under the scheme, and you can only make a proposal by changing the scheme. And what I suggest, therefore, is that this council refers back to the Democratic Processes Panel this issue about the scheme, and providing that the Democratic Processes Panel agrees to it, and there would have to be a rationale for it, not just simply to reimburse those councillors that had to repay it back last time. Then, as long as it reports back to this council before the end of this year, recommending that the scheme be changed, then that can then be backdated. But you have to change the scheme first, and you have to have a rationale for that. And that's what the democratic processes panel can do for you.
Councillor Grottig.
Thank you. That seems a reasonable way forward, if colleagues agree. We will defer the question of backdating, if that is your wish. Sorry, interim chief executive. Should you say something?
She was astonished
Yeah.
at the inventiveness and creativity of that, I suspect.
No, but I'm just waiting for Councillor Sims, please.
Similar subject, really, but when will this start then? Will it just start from August, which presumably is the most sensible time to do this, assuming it's ignoring the backdating issue a moment?
Starting tomorrow.
Okay. So I need a seconder, please, first of all, to Councillor Grottig's proposal to accept the allowances scheme as set out. So could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Mumford. Thank you. So we'll deal with that. And could we have a vote on that, please? Okay, is there an amendment to that? Councillor Dorian Smith. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. Is there an amendment to Councillor Grottig's proposal? No, there's no amendment. So can we vote on that proposal, please? All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So we will deal with the backdating through democratic processes panel. Thank you.
And can that be a formal proposal from yourself and Councillor Goethe that the democratic processes panel be asked to review the part 6 of the scheme?
I'm happy to propose that.
Thank you. And Councillor Davis, seconding. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I just wanted to make a point for consideration further down the line. There's been quite a lot of conversation on this because obviously people thinking we're feathering our own nest and things like that. I think we could perhaps have a mechanism so that it's decided independently in future, much as they do in Parliament and things like that, because it takes a lot of the grief out of the situation.
Yeah.
So that's something I think that when it next comes up, perhaps it's just
well, we can deal with this in democratic process panel. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So agenda item 16 is the corporate plan.
Sorry, Chairman. Sorry. Recommendation 2 that we approve the role profiles as well. Do we have to do? Have we done that one? Sorry. Oh,
yeah, it was part of it. Thank you.
I apologise.
Thank you. So item 16 is our corporate plan, and I'm not sure who is presenting this. Oh, it's Gemma. Thank you very much, Gemma. Page 697.
Thank you, Chairman. This update report follows the approval of the main section of the corporate plan 2019 to 2022 at full council on March the 5th, 2019. It was agreed at that meeting that a foreword from the chairman would be added and some further work undertaken on the visions, values and behaviours section of the plan. This work has been completed and we are now asking members to approve the completed corporate plan 2019 to 2020, which is included as Appendix A. To make reference to the main corporate plan easier for officers, it has been necessary to number the objectives, outcomes and 2019-20 focus points. I've also included a corporate plan summary document entitled Council of the Isles of Scilly, Our Priorities for the Islands, which has been drafted for distribution beyond our council among partners and the public. This is included as in Appendix B. In drafting this document, it became apparent that certain changes to the main corporate plan would be necessary, as explained in the report itself. For the sake of clarity, if you wish, I can run through them now. So the first change was under place. It was objective A7, and we have specified 30 new homes. Change 2, also under place, within the 2019-20 focus section, point 7, we name South West Water. Change 3, under people, objective B9, about the delivery of the integration of the health and social care project. It's been added to reflect its presence in the list of outcomes beneath. Change 4, underneath growth, objective C1, about the development of the local industrial strategy and aim to secure prosperity funding has been added to reflect its inclusion in the summary documents. These changes make the documents more consistent and easy to follow, but further work will be required in January, when I will instigate a full review of the corporate plan in consultation with members, following inevitable developments between now and then. I will bring a report to full council in March, which will propose any necessary amendments and outline the next set of focus points for 2020-2021. The aim is to monitor progress in relation to this plan on a quarterly basis and in alignment with other central documents, such as those relating to risk, performance management, and the council's finances. As I'm sure members will appreciate, this process may take some time to perfect, but I recommend the approval of both the corporate plan to 2019 to 2022 and the summary document today as a starting point. I also ask that members authorise the interim chief executive to sign off on the required design work to be undertaken by officers following this meeting. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma and Tom, for your report. Councillor Marcus.
Just say thank you to Gemma for all her hard work in bringing this all together. And thanks to all councillors for their engagement up to this point in getting this this document finally here over the line. So yeah, I'd like to propose the recommendations.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I'd echo Councillor Marcus's comments. My only question would be around point 7, paragraph 7, where we talk about monitoring objectives, and perhaps I'd like a bit more clarity. But I wonder if it would be possible to bring an update to the September meeting, which I estimate is about halfway through the year, on progress against our 2019-20 priorities. So we've got a bit of an update on what's been, what progress has been made or not made.
Yeah, we'll definitely be bringing something in September. I'll say something about that in the performance management report. I mean, 2 reports time. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Second Councillor Marcus's comments. Just to say, you know, having gone through it, there are clearly already some things that are slightly out of date and need altering, but I think we just see this as a kind of continual process of as a living document, and you know, praise the fact that we're actually there. We've got a corporate plan that gives us some direction, strategy, and I would second the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Sims.
I just wanted to give a huge vote of thanks to Dan, because I lost the will to live on this last August, and he's kept on plugging away with Gemma, and he's done really, really well done. You've done a great job. The only issue I have with it is we've got PACE. It's horribly naff. Can't we just not have an acronym then, or even CAPE?
Thank you. You've stolen my thunder, Councillor Sims. I just also, having asked Dan to get in the driving seat on this with members, it's very much appreciated, everything that you've done, Dan. And thank you, members, for supporting Dan in all this. Thank you. Councillor Legg.
Thank you, Chair. Again, echoing thanks to Dan and Gemma. On page 704, in the outcomes, the number 1 objective or outcome, I believe it should be 447 kilowatts installed. I just don't want us to be held up saying we haven't had that many installations.
Thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Legg. Councillor Smith.
Well, I was just going to reply to Councillor Legg. I did pick up a fair number of these kind of mistakes and inconsistencies. I think we take that forward to the next review and pick them up then. But I agree with you to fact check it properly.
Thank you. So we have 3 recommendations in front of you. I think we've had a proposal, was it from you, Councillor Marcus, and seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour? It's carried unanimous. Thank you. Item 17 on our agenda is risk management, page 715, and that is in the hands of Tom Walton. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. This report explains the Council's new risk management process and phased approach to embedding risk management within the organisation. Members are asked for their endorsement of this approach to risk management. This paper is an introduction to the risk management process, and hereafter members will be presented with only our reportable risks on a quarterly basis. These are the risks that are scored as either high or extreme. This is the corporate risk register. That's another term for it. It's included here as Appendix A, although it's actually incorrectly labelled as Appendix C, I think. The report states that the first quarterly report on risk will be October. We'll probably bring this forward to September, and that's to align with the first performance management report that you'll receive. The other thing I'd like to say is that this feeds directly in following the audit information you heard earlier on. The quarterly reporting on risk and performance is really, really important to the council. The audit opinion was contingent on us embedding these processes over the next few quarters. So it's actually a really important process for members to get behind. The only other thing is, I think the Chief Executive had something to say, particularly on the reportable risks, just drawing attention to those.
Thank you very much to Mr. Walton, who's very well presented that. I just wanted, if I might, to take members particularly to page 729, and it's mentioned in the document as Appendix A, although it's labelled on that page as Appendix C. This is the working document from now on. It will evolve and change over time because that is in the nature of a risk register. But putting it slightly facetiously, later on this evening when you put this into the big round filing cabinet, pull out this appendix and keep it. And this is the one that you use to work with, to identify what the issues to think about are, to identify what you want workshops on, to identify what should be in the non-financial performance management reporting, etc., etc. And next time to look at it in conjunction with the next one you'll get and see things going up and down, the right things in there, and then keep the current one as your up-to-date work, as part of your pack of key up-to-date documents, along with things like the corporate plan and that summary document that we talked about earlier. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I have said this before, but on the rather rash assumption that somebody will just look at this quite casually with no background on it, I do think we need to make it very clear that the inherent risk score, which is awful when you look at it, is on the basis of if we do absolutely nothing. I do think that needs to be made clear to somebody who perhaps casually looking at it, because obviously if you do nothing, the risk is total.
Yeah, that's a fair point. You would hope never to have the inherent risk. It's
not clear. That looks like, to the casual observer, that looks awful.
Yeah, and we are, to start with, reporting in a way advised by our internal auditor. There are other ways of reporting risk. This is very early days, and we can look at that.
Well, I have no issue with the column. All I just want is an explanatory note on it for, as I said, the casual observer.
Yeah, sure.
Can we do that, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
from now on, we'll put up in lights. So that's
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I would again echo previous comments about the importance of making sure that this doesn't slip. It's totally unacceptable to think we haven't had a corporate risk register for 3 years. And I think we've spent a huge amount of time trying to get finance right over the last couple of years. I think it's probably now that we need to start focusing on the performance management and the risk management side of things to make sure that we maintain the momentum that is here. I've also got the slight concern that as we move to the more expensive capital projects, there is a risk that this perhaps could become a distraction and we lose focus and lose sight of these two papers. And I think we've just got to make sure as members we don't allow that to happen as we get bogged down potentially in other developments across the corporate body.
Very wise words, thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, again, echoing those comments, it's good to see risk finally coming back onto the council agenda, and just like to thank Bob for all his hard work in getting this up and running.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I take it the members are happy that we endorse the recommendations 1 and 2. All happy? Thank you. So we move swiftly on to item 18 on the agenda. Again, in your hands, Tom. Thank you. Performance management.
Thank you, Chairman. So performance management was in a similar position to risk. We were starting essentially from scratch a couple of months back. I think it's fair to say performance management is in more of an embryonic stage than risk was. But actually, we are looking to start reporting on it at the September meeting, so it's not far away. So there are two aspects to this report. The first, which is immediately relevant to the audit opinion mentioned earlier, is the performance to date on the value for money action plan. Members are asked to note the progress as detailed in Appendix A. If you've got any specific questions about that, Russell should be able to answer those, but it has been covered earlier. Officers have now carried out a survey of the types of data that describe the performance of the council's really extremely broad range of services. The results of this survey are summarised in the report. Members can expect the Q1 performance report to be presented at the September meeting of full council, with regular reporting for each quarter thereafter. Just to speak to Councillor Williams's point before, I think you're right to be sort of, have a note of caution about whether we will follow through. I think something to make you feel a bit more confident about that is there are roles assigned to these jobs now, and it's very clear how the reporting process is going to be carried out and who's going to be doing it. So hopefully we will be able to follow through and you can have some confidence. The second aspect to this report, which is only briefly introduced, is that once our quarterly reporting is embedded, we'll be looking at continued development of performance management. So there are some aspects to performance reporting which are, they're important from an audit perspective, but then don't necessarily describe other aspects that maybe the community would be more interested in. It's just to say that we haven't ignored those and we will be looking into those in more detail later. So one way of doing that might be that individual teams within the council can produce, say, an annual report on their performance and sort of tell their own story, because what we found from this initial piece of work is our services are so diverse that you can't put them all in the same box. The water department looks so different to social care, but we have got ideas lined up for that too. So I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
This is great. This is the third leg. These last three papers are actually the last three legs of good corporate governance in this organisation. This is what is going to hopefully enable us to be a bit more strategic and have less surprises in the future for our planning. And I think this paper in itself this is comms. Members have always talked about poor comms and about how we're not getting our message across. And that's because we don't know what the message is. This performance management will define that message, hopefully, if it works, and will enable us to get the message out there that we're doing stuff well and doing stuff not so well. So I look forward to it, and hopefully it's resourced enough for it to be successful.
Thank you. I'd just like to say from the chair that I totally endorse what Councillor Marcus has said. And I personally think this is a great paper and it's absolutely the right way that we should be moving forward. And I think it's going to help us enormously in our work. So thank you very much. And I'm glad we've got this started. I take it that members are happy to note the 2 recommendations. Yeah. Thank you very much. So item 19 on our agenda is the gain and sustain food safety. I am going to hand that over to Nicola. Page 761. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. A short report, really, just to add to the suite of discretionary services that the environmental health team are offering to businesses on the island. It sits with our programme of providing prevention and advice and support to businesses. Again, it's a discretionary service, but it's about giving people the opportunity to get the advice and support they need to get the highest score in the health and safety, food safety scoring mechanism. It's a bit like planning applications, isn't it? If you get pre-application advice, you tend to get a better result. So the idea here is to provide something to businesses if they wish to gain the support of our team, to get them through that safety measures, to get the safety ratings. So the recommendation really is to look at that, approve that process, look at the fee that's been proposed, and this is based on a cost recovery basis, but also to look at the fee that's been charged for reassessments. In our experience so far, we're undercharging slightly on that process, so the recommendation is to increase that fee slightly from £175 per inspection to £250. So the recommendation is set out on page 761 to approve the introduction of this new scheme called Gain and Sustain and to set the fees accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Sims.
I think this is a really good initiative and well done to Nicola and Sandy. I mean, the healthy choices thing is, I think maybe other councils do it, I don't know. It's certainly new for us. And I was very proud to present the first award to, what's the deli? I now forget. I don't remember what it's called now. It's just down the road there. And it's basically, yeah, that narrows it down a little, doesn't it? Yeah. But basically, it's just that you up your healthy menu and various other little things. However, you can still serve unhealthy food to maintain profitability.
Thank you. Can I take it that you are proposing the recommendations?
Proposed, yeah.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Guy. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving swiftly on, item 20, fees and charges update, and that is in the hands of Craig. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So you'll see from the report that we're recommending an additional fee, and that's for Seagull-proof sacks. And obviously, we're promoting better containerisation of refuse and waste because there is a bit of an issue in terms of the public realm. We do get quite a lot of strewn litter from seagulls, and that not only looks bad, but it also actually wastes our operatives' time as well. So hopefully you see the recommendation and hopefully support the recommendation.
Councillor Grottig.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think this is a very good initiative. However, I would like to amend the recommendation because, quite frankly, I think we have a problem, as we have already seen with one of the finance reports, with the income that we actually get for our waste service. And I see no reason why we couldn't have a modest increase to include the carriage charge. And if you look on page 771 and look at the cost of the sack, which is £4 plus VAT, which makes it £4.80, if we then rounded it to a very reasonable £5, I can't see anyone hopefully objecting, and that way it really would be cost neutral to the council. So could I amend the recommendation that we approve the recommended fees and charges as set out in the appended schedule to include an additional fee for reusable refuse sacks at £5 per sack? I'd like to propose that recommendation.
Councillor Marcus.
Just how reusable are the reusable sacks?
They are, we have sourced them. They're similar sacks as Cornwall Council use, and they are actually very robust.
You put the sack inside it.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Is there any mechanism or leverage if we get repeat offenders who, whatever we offer, whatever we do, continue to put waste out unprotected, which then generates additional work and unsightliness? Is there anything we as an authority can do to use a stick rather than a carrot?
Potentially. Having said that, obviously, if someone actually does present their waste in a what's seen as actually a good quality black bag, and clearly, obviously, we do want people to present their waste as early as possible because we can't always guarantee what time they will be collected. Obviously, it does put that person in quite a difficult position because if a seagull does come along and actually rips their bag, is it really their fault, providing they've actually put that bag out in the morning as opposed to the evening beforehand, which might be an issue? I think the whole issue around containerisation has been an issue for us because obviously we live by the sea. We do have various vermin that will rip open bags. So what we're saying is actually this is probably the best way forward in order to actually ensure that people actually are containerising their bag. And my view is as well is if people actually pay for their own bags as well, they're more likely to respect and look after that bag. You know, if we gave out these bags, obviously free of charge to members of the public as well. So I think there is absolutely, lots of benefits potentially to this scheme.
Councillor Dean.
Yeah, I'm happy with all that. I'm a direct customer of the Waste and Recycling Centre, but I have to say I don't have a pecuniary interest in this because all the charges are passed on to my customers. But what I would like to say is if assuming we approve these increases in the charges, can we please make them public before they come in? Because the last time you put the prices up, you didn't do that. Which causes problems if you're passing on the charge to your customers.
Yeah, completely get that. And the reason we're actually, bringing this to members' attention is so we can actually charge for those bags and we will actually publicise them as well, because obviously it's in our best interests to actually promote these bags and say that what the retail price will be.
Thank you, Councillor Dean.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not just talking about the prices of the bags. I'm talking about the prices charged at the Waste and Recycling Centre.
Yeah, absolutely. But they should actually be advertised anyway. But if they're not being, adequately so, we will look into that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sims.
I'm just referring back to what Joel said. You did say repeat offenders, didn't you? And I think if you have a situation where week on week, somebody's got a bin bag outside which has been torn to pieces by seagulls, well, I think that the guys, the waste operatives, that's the correct word, will probably have a word with them actually. Because, and they certainly had a word with me.
Thank you, Councillor Mumford.
Could I just make a suggestion that instead of £5, you make it £4.99 because being in the retail business, you put £5 on something, you won't sell it. But if you put £4.99 on it, you probably will.
I don't think we're going to fight over a penny. Can we please have a proposer for the recommendation and the bin bags at £4.99? Thank you. And a seconder for that, please. Councillor Marcus. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is item 21. External appointments, and that's also in the hands of Craig Dryden. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you, Chairman. So this report is basically a follow-up to members' decision to defer the appointment to the National Association of AOMBs, and of course that was deferred in the May meeting. So this is the follow-up report. What I would say is that the AOMB partnership is actually a member of the National Association of AOMBs, and as a consequence of that, we do get considerable involvement and engagement with that particular charity. But as you'll note from the report, there's no requirement for the council to actually have a representative on the National Association of AOMBs. So on that basis, that we don't need to make an appointment, you'll see that unusually it's a bit of an open-ended recommendation. So I'm requesting that members instruct officers in terms of how they would wish to proceed with the council representative, if indeed we have one, on the National Association of AOMBs. Over to you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. As AONB representation and having discussed this for some time with officers and other members, I would recommend that the role is appointed as a council representative on the National Association of AONBs, and that also that person should have a seat at the AONB partnership, the Isles of Scilly AONB partnership, to ensure that that direct liaison between our AONB and the representation on the National Association happens. The person who previously done the job, which was Johan Hicks, has done it for a couple of years and has been going to these events for a long time, is very well recognised there, is seen as the face of Scilly's AONB at these events and is very well connected. It also has the bonus that he actually has never charged for his expenses at all, which is a small financial incentive. I'm not saying that's necessarily the right thing. However, I would therefore sort of propose, one, that the role is appointed, and secondly, I would propose that Johan Hicks is indeed that appointee.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Oh, sorry, Chairman, just for clarification, because I think in that recommendation, it wasn't just an appointment to the National Association of AONBs, but that appointment also sits on the AONB partnership as well, just for the purposes of clarity.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Yes, I'd like to support Councillor Smith's recommendation, and I would say that the current incumbent, Johan Hicks, is an environmentalist to his bones. But also I'd like to support the recommendation that he attends as council representative, because he doesn't always agree with us. And I think it's very important. He will be on occasion extremely challenging, and I can't think of a better reason to appoint somebody to such an important role. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
I've got no objection to any of that, but can we just, I think we might need to formalise the financial aspect. It's commendable he's never charged to date, but I certainly don't want to be put in the embarrassing position where at a future time, a future person might put an expenses claim in. Are we saying there is a budget for them as a council person, or are we saying there is no council financial support for any work this individual may or may not do?
Craig.
I mean, Chairman, that's a really good point, because currently there is no specific budget for somebody to actually attend the National Association of AONBs on our behalf.
Leave it as it.
As you'll see from the financial implications, if obviously a member of council was appointed, then clearly, we do have member expenses. It would have to come out of that. So obviously we would need to look at the AONB partnership budget to see whether or not there was actually spare capacity actually within that budget. And at the moment, I'm not sure if there is.
I think if I can just come in there, I do understand that Johan Hicks is not looking for remuneration or expenses in this matter. And I think whilst we're appointing him at the moment, if he's happy with that arrangement, that can follow as he requires. And if at such time we have to appoint somebody else, then we will have to have a look at the budget again, if members are happy with that. Councillor Smith.
Well, I was just going to add that I think we keep it at that arrangement for this year, and then we look at the budget for next year to consider that possibility.
Thank you. So on that basis, could I have I've got a proposal from you, Councillor Smith, and seconded by Councillor Grottick. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimous. So the last item of Part 1 is item 22, the petition scheme, page 777, and that is in the hands of Mr. Tom. No? Oh, Stephen Taylor, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Not a lot to add to the report. This is something that was referred to the Democratic Processes Panel, who met to discuss it and has recommended the tax scheme. The trigger point for petitions is recommended to be 100. Nothing further to add, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
I'll propose the recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mumford. All those in favour? Thank you. It's carried unanimous. Thank you. Part 2 reports are for information only. Unless any member has anything to say on those, I would like to thank those who have done some excellent reports here today. We've been a little bit short recently of written reports, and I would like to thank all those members who've given comprehensive reports this time.